You're listening to Real Talk Texas on 570 KLIF News and Information. Now, live in studio, your host, local real estate expert Steve Hakes.
Welcome to Real Talk Texas. I'm your host, Steve Hakes. Heard every Sunday here at noon on KLIF News and Information, AM 570. Real Talk Texas is a forum where our listeners can get real advice from real experts. And as always, you can reach out to me at realtalktexas.com. That's realtalktexas.com if you've got a question that comes up when you're listening to our show at any time. Or if you need a real expert that can give you some advice, just please reach out to me. And just send me a quick note, hit contact me, send me a note directly, and I'll put you in touch with a real expert for you. Also, you can call me off the air at 214-643-6021. That's 214-643-6021. And yes, I'm a federally licensed mortgage originator, NMLS license number 242522. Well, in October, and I guess last week too, we spent a lot of time on real estate, what's happening in the real estate market, and we found out some great news that the real estate market in North Texas is kind of turning around. The prices are at least stabilizing and maybe even coming back some. We found out from some of our real estate agents that were on the show, Judy Jones and Jenny Manning, that we're seeing multiple offers sometimes on properties once they go onto the market, which is a big change. And we found out also from Alicia Trevino that we're seeing a shortening of product that's out there on the market. So it's a supply and demand thing, which should drive prices back up here in North Texas. And as always, we've talked about the population growth that's happening in the Metroplex and what's predicted to be happening here over the next 10 years. We're expected to get another we're right just under 7 million people in the Metroplex now. And while you're seeing all this road construction, as North Texas is preparing to be at 12 million people by 2030. So that's huge. And there's going to be a big need for housing in North Texas here, especially in the Metroplex. So staying with the theme of the show, and that is basically getting real experts in our studio to help our listeners get advice on certain areas of their life that they may need. You know, one of the things we've talked about doing this week, and that is we'd like to have a show on how to cover your assets, how to protect yourself. And we really wanted to get the skinny on legal structures that both the wealthy and normal people can use. We wanted to start with 3 basic areas that every one of you listeners out there should know. Our producer, Paul Webb, has found Lori Ashmore Peters to join us today, and we're just really, really thrilled to have Lori in our studio today. And Lori is with the Ashmore Law Firm located on Maple Avenue in Dallas. And to tell you a little bit about Lori Ashmore Peters, she's been in practice since 1996. Her background is in probate, estate planning, guardianships, and mental health law, and she's served in the probate courts in Texas. She works with litigation law firms as a probate consultant and speaks with litigation attorneys regarding the necessity of probate and possible estate planning as it relates to lawsuits. She also works with many attorneys and judges throughout Texas and the United States. Ms. Peters also dedicates a portion of her practice to working with the mentally ill, and I think that's awesome. And additionally, she represents families in obtaining mental illness warrants to protect loved ones who may be in danger of themselves or to others. She also works in representing families in obtaining guardianship over a loved one who suffers from mental illness. And she has done several speaking engagements and continues to do that. So once again, on Real Talk Texas, we've got a real expert in our studio today with Lori Ashmore Peters. So welcome to Real Talk Texas.
Thank you, Steve.
One of the things we wanted to start off with kind of how we're protecting ourselves and how our listeners, any listener out there, can really do some basic things that can protect themselves and their families. And then when we started talking with you, Lori, one of the first things that came up were wills.
Yes.
So I think everybody's heard about wills. You see things online, all those things. Does everybody need a will? I mean, what's the deal?
You know, the staggering statistic out there, 70% of Americans do not have a will. If you're 18 years old, you may not need a will, but you do need some other type of estate planning documents, whether it's planning for incapacity or whatnot. But everyone needs a will. The bottom line is if you don't have a will, we call that the no plan estate plan. And if you don't have a will, you have to keep in mind that it's the state of Texas that decides who gets your property. It's the judge who decides who manages your property. For me, I want to know that I am in control. If God forbid anything happens to me, I want to know that my property that I've worked hard for goes exactly where I want it to go, and I want to know that I get to choose who manages all of that.
So 70% of the people out there listening do not have a will or anything like that right now that sets out what would happen should they die.
Yes, and it is staggering.
What if I don't really have much in assets? Do wills protect me if I've got a family? Or let's talk a little bit more about what a will does for you. Why do we really need it?
Everyone needs a will because you always have some type of assets out there. I can't tell you how many times I get a phone call where the only asset may be a bank account, and that bank account may only have a few $1,000s in it. But the sad thing is, if that individual died without a will, the attorney's fees are going to take whatever's in that account. And so that loved one needs to decide, do I even go through the expense of trying to get to those few $1,000s? If they would have had a will, then it would have been easy for them to probate the will. In Texas, it's very easy to probate, and they would have been able to get to that money that they may have really needed.
Okay, probate. What is probate?
Whenever someone dies, in order to get to their assets and for someone to manage their assets, we go through the probate process in the probate courts here in Dallas County. And the probate court determines who is going to be named as the personal representative to collect those assets. And then if you have a will, that will is actually probated so that those people that you want your money and your assets to go to gets it. Okay,
so it sounds like it's a set plan. If you have a will, it kind of gives the direction. If you don't have a will, the courts decide everything.
Correct. If you have a will, it's smooth. It's not very costly. If you don't have a will, it can get very, very costly.
So what's a basic will cost for an average person?
A basic will, if it's basic, if it's simple, it can cost as little as $500, and it can go up from there just depending on whether or not you have minor kids, depending on what kind of assets you have, depending on where you want your property to go.
Well, if you're listening out there, you're listening to Real Talk Texas. We've got the pleasure of having Lori Ashmore Peters in the studio today, and she's with the Ashmore Law Firm here in Dallas. And after the break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about protecting your assets. And you're going to want to stay tuned because after the break, we're going to give you instructions on how you can get a free gift. For the first 20 listeners out there, we're going to have a free giveaway, so stay tuned.